Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from AnthonyMorganti.com. Welcome to Mastering Luminar 2018. In this Chapter 1 of Mastering Luminar 2018, I want to talk a little bit about what Luminar is. I also want to tell you what my goals are for this video series, and then I want to do what I call Quick Start. I want to get you guys editing an image right away. So we're going to edit an image from beginning to end. We're going to load the image into Luminar, do all our editing, and then we're going to export and save that image at the end so you know how to do the entire process. But first of all, what is Luminar? Well, Luminar 2018 is a processing engine to process your images. It is non-destructive. You could process the typical JPEG, TIFF, PSD files, but it also is a raw editor. It is a non-destructive raw editor. So you could edit raw images in Luminar 2018, and most of the images that I'll be editing in this series will be raw images. Now, as far as my goals, I want to teach you Luminar 2018 in a natural way. We're going to be just editing images, and we'll reveal new features, or I'll demonstrate features in Luminar 2018 as they come up naturally. So my hope is that we're not being too pedantic in our teaching. We're just going to teach it in a very natural way. Now, I mentioned this is Quick Start, so we're going to jump right in by opening up an image in Luminar. Now I have, as you could see, Luminar 2018 open, and you come up with this welcome screen. And right here, open image. So we're going to click there, and a dialog box will pop up. And I have a raw image on my desktop. I appropriately called it Chapter 1. And I'm going to open that into Luminar 2018. All right, the image has opened up into Luminar 2018. And you can see it's just a simple shot of Lake Erie with clouds in the sky, kind of a typical, I guess, landscape shot with water and sky. Now, the workspace of Luminar 2018 is very simple. It really is. You have, of course, the image in the middle. Along the bottom, you have presets, and we're going to be getting into presets in this video series, but not today. So if you want to make a little more room and you want to get rid of these presets down here at the bottom, right here at the top, you'll see that there's a couple icons, and if you hover over it, it will tell you what it is. And this is the preset panel, and we could just click on that, and it will make our image a little larger. And it, of course, got rid of those presets along the bottom. Now, over here to the right are where our filters are, and we're going to talk more about filters in just a second. It also is our layers panel right there. Now, if you don't see this right here, there is another little button where you could get rid of that tab entirely. Now, typically, you're going to have that tab open because that's where we're going to be doing our adjustments. At the very top of that tab, we have a histogram, and we're going to be talking about that some more. And we also have some information right here. If you click on this little icon right there, we'll get rid of that histogram. Right here, where it says layers, that's our layer panel. We could get rid of that. And this right here is just info. It just tells that this shot was shot at ISO 800 at 24 millimeters f8. You could turn that off and on. And along the top, we'll get into things as we need to. Now, the whole idea of the way Luminar works, and I actually think this is kind of a more modern way of processing your image, is it's not as static as something like Lightroom is, where you have the develop module in Lightroom and you have basically your tabs on the right and you have to just use those and that processes your image. With Luminar, you have a bunch of different filters. And the way to think of the filters is you're building a wall, and the filters are the individual bricks for the wall. And we're going to be using different filters to produce different effects for our image. You could use some of them, or you could use all of them. It's really up to you, and it really opens up a lot of creative possibilities for you when you're editing your images. Now, to get to the filters, over here on the right, you'll see there's a little blue button, Add Filters, and we're going to click on that. And you can see there are a lot of filters in Luminar 2018. I just did a rough count, and I got around 50 filters. Now, they do all different types of things, but I think what you'll find is you're going to use a few of them all the time. And the people at McFun, and I should mention, this is created by a company, McFun Software, but they're changing their name to Skylum Software. And the reason being is they originally just made applications for Macintosh, so hence the name McFun. But Luminar 2018 is now available in Windows. So to, I guess, avoid any confusion, they're changing their name to Skylum. So back to the filters. We have these essential filters, and let's just pick one, this Accent AI filter. That's an artificial intelligence filter. And actually, it's just one slider. And if you move that one slider to the right, you'll see that it pretty much processes your image almost entirely. A lot of people would say this is good enough. And I think this is a fantastic filter for those of you that do, let's say, a lot of weddings, or you're doing a lot of just shooting that's very similar, and you really don't want to stay up all night processing your images or the proofs that you're going to be giving, let's say the bride and groom. And then you could do some more serious processing later when they choose the prints that they want done. So very easy, one slider. Now what you'll find at the bottom whenever you open a filter is just at the bottom overall, you'll have filters amount. It's kind of like an opacity slider. And you could just kind of fade out all the filters all at once. So a lot of times you'll have maybe 20 filters on an image. And when you're all said and done, you'll think that's a little bit too strong. And you could go to this filters amount and you could just weaken everything down equally. So that's the Accent AI filter. Now, to process this image, I want to show you a little more than this. So I'm going to delete this filter, and it's very easy to delete filters. If you just hover over it along, the bottom here, you'll see that there's this arrow, circular arrow, and that's to kind of reset the filter. But next to it is an X, and we're just going to click that X, and the filter is gone. Now, what I really want to show you is just these essential filters. If you want to do a black and white conversion, you would choose this filter. But the one that you want to probably use for all your images, not just raw files, is this one that says Raw Develop. Now, if this wasn't a raw image, if this was a JPEG, it wouldn't say raw, it would just say develop. But either way, it's pretty much the same filter. We're going to click on that. And if you look at that, this may look pretty familiar for those of you that use Lightroom. You have your basic temperature, tint, exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, whites, blacks, and a clarity slider. So you could do a lot of processing just with this one filter. And along the top, you'll see there's some tabs. You also could do lens corrections. Now, those of you that shoot mirrorless cameras or Micro Four Thirds cameras, the lens corrections most likely are already built into the raw file, so you really won't have to use this tab at all. Next to that is a transform tab, and that's for when you're shooting architecture. It comes in really handy, or real estate photography, or whenever your verticals just aren't really vertical, or your horizontals aren't actually horizontal because of lens distortion and where you're standing taking the picture. You could correct that there. Now we're going to go back to the Adjust tab, and we're going to adjust this image. Let's do white balance first. With the raw file, you'll have the different settings that were in your camera: daylight, cloudy, shade, tungsten, and you could choose one of those, and it will adjust the white balance accordingly. Now, if it's a JPEG or a TIFF or something, that's already, your white balance is already kind of cooked into those files. So these choices won't be here. You'll just have as shot. But what you can do is you can adjust the sliders manually on any image. So you could come in here and just adjust the sliders to get the white balance you like. Alternatively, That's a nice word to say. You could take this little eyedropper. So you could click on that, and what you want to do is exactly as it says in that little square. Pick a target neutral. So you want to find something that really has no color in it. And typically you'd like to find 18% gray. And if possible, whatever is gray in the image would be a proper white balance. Now, none of these that I happen to be picking. There was actually a lot of color in the sky when I was doing it. So you try to pick something that's neutral, and that would give you a very nice white balance for the image. So that's how you would do your white balance adjustment. Now you could come in here and do the other sliders as you might normally do in other applications. I think the image is exposed okay, so I'm not going to add any exposure. I don't like to do contrast right away. I like to do that a little later. Now, me and many professional photographers process our images in kind of a specific way. What we often do is we'll bring highlights down. Some photographers bring highlights all the way down automatically, and will bring shadows up. Again, some photographers will bring shadows all the way up. Now, the reason for that is many of us are doing a type of processing that people who process video do. It's called color grading. And in color grading in video, what you like to do is shoot the scene as flat as possible and do your initial adjustments to make the scene as flat as possible. Then, to give that, get rid of that flatness, you're going to instead adjust whites, blacks, and tone curve to give it like its depth. And the reason why people like to grade video that way is because it tends to minimize noise, and it helps avoid highlights that are blown out or shadows that are just crushed so much that you don't see any detail. So that's why many of us like to do that with our photography as well. So you'll see me often bring shadows down, or shadows up, and highlights down. I typically don't do them all the way, although when I teach beginners, I have them do them all the way because it's just easier for them to learn how to process an image if they just automatically bring highlights all the way down and shadows all the way up. Now in this image, I don't think I need to. I think this setting is good. Now to get a good white and black point is a little more tricky. You don't just want to haphazardly throw these sliders around. Now there's a couple different ways you could go about doing this. You can hold the Alt or Option key in. It's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have a Mac, then click on, in this case, the white slider, and you'll see that the entire screen turned black. Now move that white slider around until you see some color or light bleeding through that black palette. Typically, what you'd like to do is bring this down so there's either very little coming through or none coming through. Now that will come down to your personal taste. Some people like to have a little bit of white clipping. That's what it's called. You're clipping the whites. When you see this coming through, that means your whites are starting to clip. And you have 3 channels represented, red, green, and blue. And you'll see some of those dots are green. There's a couple blue in there. I don't see too many red. But when they're all clipped together, you'll see white come through. So you want to just bring that down. For me, I prefer to not have my whites clip at all. So I bring it to there. Now black, similarly, you would hold that Alt or Option key in. Again, it's Alt if you have a PC, Option if you have a Mac. And you'll see this time the screen turns white. And if I bring blacks down, you'll see that we're starting to get that bleed through again. Now for me, my personal style is I like to have the blacks clip a little bit. To me, that adds a little more depth to the image. So that's the way I like to do it. Now, an alternate way you could do this is if you look up here at the histogram, you'll see that there's a triangle here, very faint, but it's on the left. And there's another triangle here over on the right. Now, if you click this triangle, let's say, you'll see it's turned on And we could see that we have some blue here. This is indicating that we're clipping. Let me take my blacks down a little more. Now you could see that I'm clipping in here because I turned on my clipping indicator for blacks. That is that left-hand triangle. Let's turn that off. Let's turn whites way up. And let's go over here to this other triangle on the right, and we'll click on that, and you could see we have red up here. So now we're clipping our whites. Now, another way you could do this is make sure that your filters panel is closed. It has to be closed to do this. Push in the J key on your keyboard. When you push the J key in, it will turn both indicators on, and it will keep them on. And then what you could do is you could take this white slider and move it to the left until all that red, in my case, the way I like to adjust my images, till all that red is gone. Then I'll take this black slider and I'll move it to the right until I just have a little bit of that blue there. Now to turn these back off, just hit the J key again and they're off. Now the reason why I said that filters panel has to be closed is because there's a search bar up here. And if you hit J with that open, you're just actually searching. You're not actually turning on and off the clipping indicators. So that's why, you need that closed. Now, we have a good white and black point set. Now we're going to turn some clarity up. Now I must warn you, clarity is very, very strong. It does a lot. So we're just going to bring it up at 15, I think, for this image. So I'm going to get another filter. We're going to open up our filters panel by clicking that button again. We're going to stay in this essentials area here. Let's get saturation and vibrance. And you can see that there's a couple sliders here. We'll turn saturation up just a touch. Vibrance up just a touch more. Just a very little bit. That's just the way I like to do it. Structure will add some kind of like, kind of clarity, but it's a clarity with a brain, I guess. You could better adjust it by these three sliders with the mount, softness, and boost. And we're going to go into these a little more. As I mentioned, this is quick start. I'm just getting you going to get used to using filters. The filters are the bricks of the wall that we're building. And finally, I think I want to finish this image off with a vignette. Now, actually, I think structure is just a little too strong, so I'm going to bring that down. And I'm going to finish it off with a vignette. I'm going to click there. And you can see that we have different modes, post-crop and pre-crop. I recommend that you use post-crop most of the time. That way, when you crop the image, the vignette will go with it, meaning the vignette will look proper. If you do pre-crop, then when you crop, if you end up cropping the image afterwards, then the crop will be cropped out. So you don't want to do pre-crop usually. So we're going to have an amount, and you can see, I'm going to bring that all the way down just so you can see what we do. And you can see the size affects the size of the vignette. Roundness is how oval or rectangular it might be. If you want to reset a single slider, just double click on the name. So I want to reset roundness back to the middle or its default position. Just double click on the word roundness. Feather is how much it's either very abrupt transition or a real gradual transition. And inner light will kind of brighten up inside of that vignette, and that helps highlight your subject a little more. So I'm going to put a real vignette on this image. And again, I could hit this little circular arrow here to reset these sliders back to where they were. And then I could better give a vignette. Now, personally, I like very faint, dark vignettes. By the way, if I move that to the right, I'd get a white vignette. And I prefer not to have white vignettes usually. I like kind of these faint black vignettes. That's just my style. Now again, at the very bottom, we have this filters amount slider. If you felt this was too strong, you could move this to the left, and it's kind of like an opacity slider, and that will lessen the effects of all your filters. Now you could keep adding more and more filters as you go. As I mentioned, there's 50 different ones, and we're going to be going over a lot of them in this series. Now, I think the image is done and I want to save it. Well, there's two different things about saving. You could save the image as a Luminar file and it will preserve all of these filters over here, so you could come back in at a later time and re-edit these filters. Also, you could export the image as like a JPEG, or you could export it to many of the social networking sites on the internet. And to do that, just go up here in the top right hand corner. You'll see this box with the upward facing arrow. If we click there, you can see there's very top, there's a button, Export to Image, and then below that we could share it in our mail, messages, Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, SmugMug, 500px. Below that is Open In. If you want to send this to another editing app and you have it loaded on your computer, you could send it to any of these. Now, I'm going to export it to an image, so I'm going to click right there and we come up with this box. It's a JPEG, and I want to just do a little bit of sharpening. It's really personal taste. I'm just going to resize this. You could send it as the original size. It's a very large RAW file. It was a very large file because it was shot with a Nikon D800E. But I'm going to resize it relatively small, 1080, color space sRGB. You have the choices of Adobe and ProPhoto also. We're going to do the JPEG. You also could export it as a PNG, GIF, TIFF, or is that GIF? It depends how you want to say it. And all these others. So we're going to stay with JPEG, and I'm going to keep quality right around there. I'm going to send it to my desktop. Also, you could click there and you could see more of your file structure on your computer if you want to navigate to a specific folder to save it in. So I'm going to save this to my desktop. So it's processing it. Now it's saved it to my desktop. Now, I didn't save the actual file though with all these filters, and I want to do that. So to do that, we're just going to go up to File and we're going to go to Save, and it will ask me where, and you can see that it will give it its original file name .dng, and in this case, because it's a DNG, if you were, you know, Nikon or Canon, if Canon would be .cr2 or whatever. But at the end it has .lmnr, that's a Luminar file. And we're going to save this to the desktop, and you could save the original resources to the document. That's everything that was originally in that file to begin with, and your metadata and all that stuff, and I want to do that. You could save the history to the document, and we'll talk about history in just a second, but we'll save that as well. And you can see how that makes the file bigger, from 39.8 megabytes to 42 megabytes. So we'll save that as well. We're saving that to the desktop, and we'll go there. So now it's saved that. Now, what it was mentioning about history, if you click this little button right here, that's our history, and every step I did to this image is recorded. And you could go back if you say, well, you know, I want to go back before the vignette was on. I could click there, and then that's the image without the vignette. So that you could really go back in history step by step. Even when a slider was moved, it's recorded here. So let's minimize that. And over here on our desktop, we have our Luminar file, and we also have our JPEG right here. We have our original file right there. And there's our JPEG that we just exported from the image. And now let's go back to Luminar for a second. And I'm just going to totally close this. And now if you want to reopen the image, all you need to really do is click on this image. If you double click on that, it will open in Luminar 2018 automatically. And you could continue on with your editing or change your edits or anything like that. Okay, now that's it for Chapter 1. Thank you for watching. In our next chapter, we're going to be doing some more processing, and we're going to get into some more of the different filters that are available in Luminar 2018. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.